Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars lore video. Today we'll be continuing our Era series with a look at Mon Calamari Cruisers in both Star Wars Legends and Canon. You can see my prior videos on Star Destroyers and Clone/Stormtroopers by clicking the annotation, which will take you to the new playlist I've made. Is there anything else you'd like to see me explore in this fashion? Please let me know down in the comments. I'd like to do more of these, so I'll be checking them pretty regularly. Anyway, as I said, today we'll be looking at Mon Calamari Cruisers. Mon Cals, of course, were the backbone of the New Republic Navy in both Legends and Canon, and helped the Rebel Alliance break the galaxy out of the Empire's grip. But it probably won't surprise most of you to know that the history of the Mon Cal shipyards and Mon Calamari Cruisers actually goes back to before the Galactic Civil War. That being said, it is this time period that we know the least about, so I'll be fairly brief. This first era would see the Mon Calamari first run into the Republic, fairly late in the game actually, only 4,000 years or so before the Battle of Yavin. This is of course all Star Wars Legends content. However, at that point, they already had a fairly sizable navy, and up until the Clone Wars, Mon Calamari starships would protect the sector and the continuously growing holdings of the Mon Calamari. Here we see the emergence of an interesting trend, which would be the divergence between the Mon Calamari and Quarren populations on the planet. This distinction was especially important early on. Eventually, the Mon Calamari would join the Republic, and during the Clone Wars, would produce various starships, including most notably Dreadnought-class heavy cruisers based on the famous Rendili design. However, the famous Providence destroyer, which served the Separatists, was also created by the Quarren of Mon Cala, and based on that same Dreadnought design. The mighty Mon Calamari shipyards at this point would be a serious point of conflict throughout the entire war. So just to summarize, I think the key elements of this era would be the rising prominence of the Mon Cali shipyards, work for both the Republic and the Separatists, and the production of what seemed to be a very powerful sector navy in the post-Ruusan years. This takes us to Era 2, which I've called Early Resistance. The Mon Calamari were particularly cruelly subjugated by the Empire early on after the fall of the Republic. The shipyards were obviously put out of commission, the Empire chose not even to use them, and the Mon Calamari and Quarren were used as slaves. This shared sentence, I think, is one of the reasons we don't see the same sort of divisiveness between the Quarren and Mon Calamari in later history. Anyway, eventually Grand Moff Tarkin, who had grown to appreciate Mon Calamari starship design, allowed the shipyards to make a line of luxury vessels. These ships would later become the first Mon Calamari cruisers to serve the Rebel Alliance. Although they were not created with any weapons or military-grade equipment, they were made in such a way that they could be quickly adapted for that later purpose. I'd say that's pretty similar to what the CIS did, for example, with their Lucrehulks, a ship that technically abided by all restrictions put upon them, but could be quickly modified for combat. After successfully overthrowing the Empire, the Mon Calamari quickly began to refit these vessels, and they put them into service with the Rebel Alliance. The MC-80 was easily the most common and the best large capital ship type used by the Rebel Alliance. It still had some issues. For example, it was meant to be commanded by the Mon Calamari, and the ship was sort of uncomfortable for humans, but they were also known for their sophistication, their great sensor and computer systems, and their impressive shielding and durability. As we move into what I would call a late Resistance sub-era, the Rebel Alliance, after winning the Battle of Endor, continues to rely on the Mon Calamari shipyards. A large portion of the faction's income is being dedicated to building new warships, and although a truly next-generation Mon Calamari cruiser is not ready for full production, the MC-80B has entered service. I think it would be safe to say that the MC-80B wasn't necessarily a completely new ship type. Rather, it was the more extensive and more technologically impressive refitting of existing ships. That takes us to the next era, which I've called a true military. The defining ship of this time period would be the MC-90. The MC-90 was the first post-Clone Wars Mon Calamari warship designed with a combat purpose in mind, rather than being a refitted civilian vessel. The 90 removed a lot of the eccentricities of the prior ship models while still keeping basically all of their strengths. At this point, it could stand up to a Star Destroyer head-to-head, and became an essential part of the New Republic's navy. At the same time, the shipyards would have still been producing other large capital ship types while also producing corvettes, frigates, and fighters. One thing to note here is that in this era especially, the Mon Cal shipyards would have been producing vessels of not only their design, but also others, like they did with the Dreadnought during the Clone Wars. Additionally, Mon Calamari Cruisers would have been produced at other shipyards. A good example would come later when Corellia created one of the Viscount class star dreadnoughts. But this era also saw the Mon Calamari homeworld be targeted by various imperial groups. The Reborn Emperor and Dala both launched raids against Mon Calamari, with the former being especially destructive. Almost ironically though, as the Mon Calamari were perfecting their next generation of capital ships, the New Republic was also now relying on other large vessels. About half a decade after the launch of the MC-90 sees the new class project, with Republic-designed Star Destroyers increasingly entering service alongside captured Imperial models, although that's not necessarily related to the Mon Calamari warships themselves. It does sort of inform how ship production and design would have been carried out. Various conflicts which saw the New Republic dancing with Super Star Destroyers brings us to our next era, which I'll simply call upsizing. During this era, the Mon Calamari made a series of large ships, but not only large, extraordinarily powerful. One was the Mediator, a battlecruiser which could pacify threats just with its mere presence. However, the Mediator was only a precursor to a much larger vessel, the Viscount. The first Viscount actually wasn't all that large, at 3 kilometers according to the Essential Guide to Warfare, but the full-sized ship would be 17 kilometers long. We know that at least 2 Viscounts were made, the Krikana and the Bounty, and it's likely more were constructed as well. However, the class was almost not made because the years before the Yuuzhan Vong invasion saw, well, peace for the first time in a while. The Viscount was mostly meant as an answer to the Empire's Super Star Destroyers, so when the two factions made peace, many questioned the necessity of such a large starship. However, they served valiantly against the Yuuzhan Vong and for the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances after the war. The early Legacy era also features the Blue Diver, which it calls a heavy carrier, as well as other heavy Mon Calamari Cruisers, indicating, I think, a continual focus on large ships, which is actually somewhat surprising given that most factions were beginning to trend down in capital ship size, especially the Empire and their turbulent class Star Destroyer. That takes us to the final era, which I'll call Legacy. By the Legacy era, it seems like the Mon Cals had moved away from large capital ships and back to smaller, very efficient warships, which we see with the MC-140, the Tri-Scythe, and others. Interestingly, it also seems like the Mon Cals moved away from each starship being a sort of unique vessel and instead towards more standardized production methods like we'd see with a Star Destroyer. Mon Calamari Cruisers at this point also became more heavily specialized, and I've talked specifically about ships like the MC-140 in prior videos. By that point, the planet became enslaved by the Sith Empire, and the shipyards were used to produce vessels for the Sith Empire, like the Imperius. Following another rebellion and the theft of the Imperius, Mon Calamari was decimated and the shipyards largely destroyed, taking us to the end of our final era. However, before we leave, let's take a quick look at canon as well. Much of the early eras are the same, with one key difference, I think. Mon Calamari Cruisers in canon are not usually luxury starships refitted for war, but actually buildings designed within the underwater Mon Calamari cities. After the formation of the New Republic, instead of an upsizing in the military like we see in Star Wars Legends, the New Republic in canon instead downsized. Most likely, with this lesser funding and I guess lesser need, there would have been less Mon Calamari Cruisers, but also less technological innovation. By the time of the First Order invasion, it seems like Mon Calamari Cruisers are serving largely as part of that sector's defense fleet. Unfortunately, we don't know a lot about specifics, because aside from the MC-85, we haven't seen many new era Mon Calamari Cruisers, so we'll have to save a deeper discussion of canon for another video. And that's all I have for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this content. Let me know which cruiser is your favorite and which you would have liked to learn more about. Do you have any questions, or is there something you'd like me to see break down in the future? Leave that down below. Anyway guys, as always, this has been EckhartsLadder. Have a great day, and may the Force be with you.